welcome back to Black Book Stacks. I'm your host, Toshonda Sanders, and this is my channel. Thank you so much for checking me out, for your likes, shares, and subscribes, for your comments. I appreciate them all. I just finished reading. So I loved Libertie by Kaitlyn Greenidge, who wrote the wonderful novel We Love You, Charlie Freeman, which I just finished reading last year at some point. I purchased it a long time ago, but I just didn't get around to it. And so I won't talk about them in comparison to each other. I think that they have some similarities. Libertie is essentially the story of, I think it's based on a true story. So it's actually like a recovered history of one of the first Black women, if not the first Black woman, to perform acts as a doctor in Kings County, New York, which is otherwise known as Brooklyn, or it's Brooklyn now, but at that point, I think this is in the 1800s or so. I want to say it's during Reconstruction, but I'm not really clear on that. So my disclaimer is that reading a lot of galleys or other things on screens, which is great for the environment, and it keeps me from like being buried in books, which is nice, even though that's sort of like the dream, right? Is to just have so many books that like literally I can't move around. Just joking. That makes me sound like a hoarder, which I kind of am, but it's like, that's not really the dream. But anyway, it's like ideally I would have like a print copy of all these things, but pandemic plus just general needing to save time, I don't always get the print copy. So I read this on my Kindle app, and was excited to have just the virtual copy to read over the last several months. I've been sort of dipping in and out of it since, I don't know, I want to say November or so, when it first got on my radar. And so it's the story of this woman who is a doctor, and her daughter Libertie obviously is the main protagonist. And it is very clear from the start that this mom has very high ambitions for her pioneering work, but also that she is relatively marginalized by some of her peers. She doesn't really get to participate in the studies, the clinical studies that they do. They have kind of a different philosophy than she does, just in terms of medicine, and there's just some general shade happening in her direction. But Libertie is her hope, her dream for the future. She hopes that her daughter is going to see kind of as being her apprentice over the years in a way that she will be inspired to then carry her mother's practice forward in the same way, which she is actually not really that into. It doesn't really become clear to me what she wants to pursue instead. I think she really is just shaping herself in opposition to her mother, which is totally fine. What I love about Libertie as a novel is that it does such a great job. First of all, the epistolary correspondence, which I'm a huge fan of, and if you've read An American Marriage, then you'll completely understand this. It reminded me of that, like that pitch perfect way of capturing the annoyance and the beauty of the ways that mothers and daughters communicate with one another. There's at some point it becomes clear that when Libertie is exchanging notes with when she goes off to college, and so she's exchanging these notes with her mother, and her mother is basically sending her problems to solve, or like case studies, like draft case studies for her to edit and respond to, and she just at some point flat out refuses to do that, which of course like irritates her mother to no end. But it's really this like aggressive, like you would say passive aggressive, but it's like aggressive ploy for control at a distance, which is Libertie is like, not doing it, which I love about her. There are these two characters that eventually are called the Graces, Louisa and Experience, who are just so fun to read. Definitely like the first young women that Libertie experiences, and so she's like, that she encounters, I want to say, that let her know essentially that the way that she grew up is like kind of abnormal, and that she just like talks about her mother a lot, and that makes them feel weird because they're like, don't you know anything else? And she's kind of like, no, not really. At some point she meets a dashing young man, Emmanuel Chase, and that kind of sets us up for the rest of the book, which I will not spoil here. So I loved Libertie. I would say that I was more enchanted by it than I was by We Love You, Charlie Freeman, but I think We Love You, Charlie Freeman is such a different book. It's it felt like it was shorter. I'm not able to tell right off the bat like which one was longer, which one was shorter, but We Love You, Charlie Freeman seemed like it was tighter, right? Like that it had a very specific event and family unit reacting to those events, whereas Libertie has a longer period of time over which it is unfurling, it feels like, and so it had more like of an epic sweep, and by the time I got to the end, I was not sure how I felt about the ending, in part because there are other really fascinating Black women that emerge at the end, and they felt really complicated, and I loved that, but I also wondered if they belonged there. Like I almost wanted to read them earlier, because they felt like they just needed more oxygen in the book, and that's also obviously, like everything that I'm saying, super subjective, right? Like, I mean, you can't just put the characters somewhere else in the manuscript, like that's what. But for those of you who will read it, which I hope you do, because it is a beautiful book, and absolutely worthy of your time and attention, which is the reason why I'm like even doing this vlog in the first place, video. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what you think about that. Yeah, it's hard for me to talk about it without, I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. So, yeah, I think I loved it. I thought it was fun to read. I thought it's always like a joy after you've been waiting for an author to release their next thing, to inhabit the world that they've crafted. I think with Kaitlyn Greenidge in particular, I'm so edified by how she weaves history with fiction, the way that she inserts or recovers essentially these people, these Black women essentially who have been, whose stories have basically been forgotten, and reinserts them and actually centers them in her novel, which is just beautiful to read. So those are my thoughts on Libertie. I hope that you will read it. It comes out March 30th. 2021, and the cover is beautiful. When I upload this, I'm gonna put the photo next to my face so that you can see how lovely it is. And yeah, so Libertie, Kaitlyn Greenidge, March 30th, check it out. If you've read it already, let me know what you think. If you were a fan of We Love You, Charlie Freeman, let me know what you think. And yeah, looking forward to talking books with you again soon. Bye.